Kim was kneeling in front of her again, begging her to give him a divorce. He could no longer live like that. She was impenetrable, didn't want to let him go just like that, and didn't want to let him go at all, in principle. She needed something in return, something she could consider an equal exchange, and it seemed she knew exactly what she wanted to get. I hated my father because he was a drunkard and spent whole days in the casino. My mother left this world long ago, and I stayed with my father for one simple reason. He was the only relative in the whole world. I worked several jobs to support myself and my father. Looking at the cafe visitors, I envied the children who were loved, indulged, and allowed all sorts of mischief. Once, when I came home from work, my father asked to borrow a large sum of money from me. I didn't understand why he needed it, but I agreed to hear him out. My father told me that a new coin had appeared, thanks to which many had already become rich, and he hoped to make a lot of money from it. I did not agree to give up my savings, which I earned through hard work. They were more important to me than some dubious chance to make money. But what can I say? My father can be persuasive. He asked for one last chance, said it would be the last time. I agreed, and he was very pleased with my decision, promising that this time he would definitely not let me down. And so, not even a couple of days had passed since our agreement when suddenly father was no more. He died in a car accident. They say that due to heavy rain his car skidded. He lost control and died on the spot. I felt sadness and loneliness, for now I was completely alone, but at the same time a strange feeling of liberation came over me. Once I came across a TV show about a person who is still so young, but already rich. He decided to share the secret of success. I almost choked when I heard what he was telling and how much capital he has now. And it turned out that it was all thanks to that very coin that my father had asked for money. Maybe he was right, and I believed him not in vain. But has it really grown so much in value? I decided to check and almost fell off my chair. My balance was 35 billion. I couldn't sit still at home. I constantly wanted to look at these incredible numbers, so I decided to go for a bike ride. But even so, I could not get distracted from thoughts about my account. There was a lot of joy, but also a lot of doubts, and even worries that suddenly all this would disappear, that the price would drop. Having arrived home, I decided that I needed to be patient and wait, because even if the price drops a little, it's still a lot of money. And yet, unable to resist, I looked at my account once again and could not believe my eyes, for there was something that left me in shock. Here's the new workday. The boss said that someone needs to go to Busan to fix things in the company. Well, my colleagues just don't want to strain themselves. As usual, they sit and make faces at each other, but no one wants to go. And since I spent the whole weekend at the computer, watching the rise in the price of Bitcoin, not eating or sleeping, I decided to offer my candidacy. The boss said we had to go together, so Chosua volunteered to go with me. To say I was stunned is an understatement. However, my colleagues perked up. Everyone started offering their candidacies, but, to their regret, the boss said that the two of us would be quite enough. And here we are, Sua and I, driving to the neighboring town. I look at her and think how great she looks behind the wheel. I didn't know what to talk to her about besides work. But then I remembered that she once said Busan was her hometown and decided that would be a great topic. Of course, as I thought, she supported this conversation and told a lot of new things about this wonderful city. So we drove on chatting about everything. We arrived, I should say, at sunset. And of course, the evening landscape impressed me. The road was long and tiring, especially for Sua, and we decided to have some coffee. The next day, she invited me to go shopping with her, saying that she hadn't gone out anywhere for a long time. I immediately agreed. After resolving all work issues, you can allow yourself to relax a little. When I saw the prices, I was shocked. And then Sua asked if I wanted to buy a suit for myself, and it seemed she was determined. Suddenly, she asked me to play the role of her boyfriend for her parents, as her younger sister had had a boyfriend for a long time, and her parents wanted the same for her. I had to agree. Helping is a good thing, although this venture seemed dubious to me. Here's the restaurant where Sua and I are having dinner with her parents. I have to admit, they chose a good place for the meeting. The Cho family are wonderful people. They immediately started asking questions about us and how we met. The question arose about how we got close, and I explained that it happened when their daughter had just started working and I taught her the basics. The interrogation of her father also affected me, about who my parents were, who raised me, and so on. Sua's parents are very kind. Good people, I thought, looking at their happy family. After dinner, the moment of farewell came. The parents did not want to let us go for a long time, but the girl handled it quickly. Sua approached to hug her parents, and my ears caught my mother's laughter and the girl's cries for them not to say silly things. I wonder what they were talking about. While walking along the embankment, she began to apologize for getting me involved in this. I quickly reassured the girl and said that I was pleased to meet her parents. Then she suggested going to an interesting place. I had no idea where we would end up. I didn't expect that. We came to a fortune teller. I didn't think we'd have to visit such a place. The woman told Sua that she has a wonderful future and nothing to worry about, and I was glad that she was pleased with what was said. The fortune teller also said that not so long ago, due to her hesitations, she missed out on something, but that something will return one day. I sat and thought that it's not worth trusting people like fortune tellers. And then the old woman turned to me. I was puzzled as to how she knew everything about my life. Although I don't believe in it, I was struck by the fact that she was telling the truth, and that I don't have to do anything and luck will still be on my side. Although I did not know if she was telling the truth, it was nice to hear that, and I hoped that what was said would turn out to be true. After leaving the tent, we decided to take a walk along the embankment. An evening stroll by the sea is just what you need before bed. Upon returning from the business trip, I quickly decided to check my balance and, oh horror, what I discovered. I sat staring at the computer screen, unable to believe my eyes. How could this have happened? I had lost a whopping 300 million. Since I returned, all I've been doing is sitting at the computer and monitoring changes in the exchange rate. Different thoughts came to him, whether to sell everything or leave it as it is, and he could not make up his mind. We stood on the roof with colleagues, and all their conversations were about the exchange rate. While I was thinking that I hadn't had enough sleep today, all my thoughts were occupied by my assets, how much I currently have in my account, and how much more the price will rise. And then, my colleagues asked me about my trip to Busan, and it was even suggested that it would have been better for me to go with one of my male colleagues, but I ignored this jibe. Then the topic of investments came up again. Colleagues asked the manager if the company's shares had risen in price and when it would pay off. I was interested to hear how everyone would spend their profits and how much they want to invest. I was walking to my office and thinking that maybe I should withdraw some of my savings. Having returned home, I sat down at the computer again, looked at the numbers, and decided to wait a little longer. Just recently, Bitcoin was worth $7,000. Now it's $5,200. My losses amount to $4 billion. It's a nightmare. In the morning, I sat in the park and thought about how much I had lost and what could have been done with that money. And I looked at my account again. What should I do? Sell everything right now and earn 45 billion, or wait after all? And then colleagues approached, but I never understood whether they saw anything or not. Aha! You finally noticed, so I'll have to explain. Although I didn't want to go into detail about it. I had to tell how much money I have now. Of course, I understated it, but they believed me and said that Bitcoin will continue to rise in price. And here, as proof of their words, they showed me the current price, and it shot up again. They did not understand the expression on my face, and I was thinking about how much money was in my account right now. In addition, the guys said that this is not the peak yet, and the price will keep rising and rising. How much can I earn? I was curious if anyone else besides me had bought Bitcoins, and it turned out that yes, a few more colleagues had invested in it. The guys were talking about something else, but I didn't hear them anymore. I was thinking about what I should do. Sell everything now or wait a little longer. The next morning, I couldn't believe my eyes. There were 150 billion in my account. 150 billion? This cannot be. Am I really that rich? Phew. No, this is not a dream. It's real. I must have looked pretty bad at that moment, though I don't know how a person with an idiotic smile on their face can look. I realized one thing, that I need to calm down. I need to think carefully about what to do, because for now this money is not mine. What should I do next? I can sell everything now and live comfortably until the end of my days, or wait a little longer and earn even more. I sat and could not understand what to do with all this, while the colorful charts flashed before my eyes. And then, as if a demon whispered that I could earn even more by doing nothing, that everything would be fine, how could I refuse such an offer? Of course, I agreed that it was possible to earn more, and I told myself that everything would work out for me. I just needed to wait a little longer. I looked back and glanced at my father's photo, thinking that this time he was right, since it was he who insisted on investing money in this currency. Recalling that day, I realized that if it weren't for Dad, I wouldn't be so close to a carefree existence now. Sua, coming to work and not finding Kim at his place, thought that perhaps the boss had sent him on a business trip again. In her thoughts, she completely forgot that she had to take the documents for signature to the head of the department, and decided to ask if he knew where Kim was, and it turned out that he had taken a day off. And Kim decided to go to a car dealership, for he had long dreamed of his own car. Looking around the showroom, he didn't know what he wanted, but suddenly he saw her. It wasn't just a car, it was his dream. I agreed without hesitation. I was offered an installment plan, but I decided to pay everything at once. Why would someone with money need that? Having arrived home, I looked again at the photo of my father and thought about how right he was when he said that it would be a successful investment. Now, having sold everything, I was rich, having sold all the assets at a fairly high price, young and successful, and I liked it. However, now there is a new headache. What should I do with such money? To start with, I decided to find out how things were going with the car delivery. I was told that it would be delivered as soon as all the necessary documents were processed. Now we can see what I wanted to do next, because I had a whole list practically since school. The next item was buying an apartment, and not just any apartment, but the apartment of my dreams. I went to a real estate agency to get help with the selection because I needed something special. And so the manager took me to the best area of the city. That's what I need. She showed the best option, and I was satisfied with it, but it was worth considering everything in detail. We went into the hall. It was not just an apartment, it was a huge place, even bigger than I had expected. The girl started telling me about the layout, but I could only think about how this place was dozens of times bigger than where I currently live. But that was not all. I decided to look at the view from the window, and it was magnificent. At such a height, the entire city was visible, and the rays of the sunset were twice as beautiful. Now that all the formalities are settled, you can move in. Oh yes, payment. I decided to pay the same way as for the car, in cash, since it's more convenient, isn't it? As expected, there was the same reaction here as in the car showroom. Meanwhile, at the office, colleagues were discussing their dinner at the restaurant yesterday, and apparently not just discussing. And at the most interesting moment, Sua burst in. She was burning with anger. And as it turned out, the reason for her anger was that she was worried about Kim, and she wanted to find out where he lived, whether there was something between them. Chan Yep decided to try to find out the reason for such interest in Kim and what she needed him for. It turned out the reason was simple. She was told that he was ill and she wanted to visit him, although he doubted her words. After Chan texted and Kim replied, Sua could hardly contain her joy upon learning that they could visit him. And then a hunch pierced him. Maybe the girl fell in love, which is why such a storm of emotions. And here they are already walking to the specified address. But Chona cannot shake the thought that everything here is not as simple as it seems. Sua assumed that Kim had a beautiful house and he was a wonderful host, and also that he probably cooked wonderfully. John assumed that he was frugal and lived in the same house where he and his ex-wife had lived. But reality turned out to be much worse. It was not a house, but some kind of dump. How can he live here? But Kim seemed little concerned about it. Everything seemed to suit him. The guy noticed that his friends didn't like the smell, and he tried to reassure them by saying that the smell was coming from outside. Sua was only thinking about how sorry she felt for him, since he lived all alone, and in such a place. But then Chan came to his senses. His friend had said he was moving and offered his help. Kim tried to object, but his friends were adamant. Going out into the street with boxes in their hands, they were surprised to see a Ferrari in such a neighborhood, wondering what such a car was doing here. Kim interrupted his friend's thoughts by announcing that the boxes could be loaded into the car, but surely he hadn't ordered such a luxurious vehicle for the move. It turned out to be Kim's car, but how, where from, could he have inherited something? Of course they both dreamed of riding in such a car, but unfortunately there was only one seat. Of course Chan gave way to the girl. He is a man and a friend. And here we are, speeding through the city in a new car, with me behind the wheel. I asked how her parents reacted to me as a suitor. It turned out that they already see me as her husband. I decided to keep quiet about my wealth, assuring the girl that I would tell her everything later. My colleague was silent for a moment and asked where I was moving to. Just be patient, you'll see for yourself soon. Meanwhile, Khan decided to break with the past, put her life in order, and return to work, which she informed the management about. Khan Shivan was a very attractive woman, but her character left much to be desired. Yes, everyone dreams of riding in such a car, and Chan is no exception. But you need to watch your speed. What I told my friend when he was even ready to die for a ride in a Ferrari. And then he slowed down and started a conversation about Sua. I think there was a tricky question here, but I never caught what it was. As soon as I showed up at work, my colleagues bombarded me with questions about the new car and apartment. I didn't think it would come to this. Naturally, they asked where I earned so much. I had to reveal the secret to them, but not the whole thing. The guys were talking about how lucky I was, and complaining that they suffered losses since when they decided to invest, the price went down. And also, they started asking me to advise them where it's better to invest now. How would I know that? But something had to be said, after all. How could one refuse colleagues? I told them that in order to invest, you need to be a beast in this world and rely only on yourself. But I didn't dare to tell the truth. And in fact, he invested the remaining assets in crypto, deciding that it should develop in any case. After thinking it over, I still shared the information with the guys, but warned them that they were responsible for their own actions. I told them about the two new currencies I had invested in, and immediately an interrogation began about why those particular ones. I explained that compared to others, they look more understandable and reliable. And I also had to explain that I eventually invested my own money in them. Sua was getting ready when she heard her colleagues talking. Here the girls saw her and decided to ask if she knew how Kim was doing. She did not know what to say, realizing that the rumors had already spread, and there was no escaping them. It turns out colleagues have already figured it all out themselves. They decided that Kim gambles and drinks. These two magpies are useless to explain to, but Sua must find out at all costs where these rumors are coming from. At that time, Khan had already arrived at the office. No one expected to see her, and why she needed Kim. She was told that Kim was not there today, and it turned out the woman was upset. She thought that perhaps they were trying to deceive her, so she decided to ask around from others as well. And there she was, Kim thought, when he ran into his ex-wife in the hallway and almost dropped the boxes from his hands. And she is just as beautiful and unapproachable, although her character leaves much to be desired, for that was the reason for the divorce. And the memories came crashing down on Kim with renewed force, just like the first time she unleashed her anger on him for what she thought was booking the wrong hotel. He really didn't understand her then. It seemed to him that he had made the right choice. But here is work, and personal life should not interfere. She simply brought him the documents. As she left, Khan thought about how Kim had changed. He hadn't been like that before, and now he was looking her straight in the eye, even defiantly. Returning to her department, the woman thought she should destroy him. But seeing her colleagues, she became sweet again so that no one would guess her plans. And only one of her colleagues knew that all this was pretense, and that Chaewon was not so sweet. Kim sat at his desk and thought about how, upon seeing Han, he felt nothing. How could that be, since he had once loved her? His reflections were interrupted by a friend, who wanted to discuss something and invited him for coffee. After climbing onto the roof, he realized that something was wrong. All his colleagues started congratulating and thanking him. It turns out that the crypto he invested in rose by 80%, and the guys who listened to him made good money. Despite such attention, he thought only about one thing, how much he had in his account now. And his thoughts flew further and further to counting his capital, and by his calculations he had become very rich. Colleagues kept thanking him, but he briefly replied that it was only their merit, since they themselves had decided to take the risk. And when he was asked how much he had invested, Kim decided not to tell the truth, and said that he had invested only 4 billion. But now the question arose whether it was worth selling everything now or waiting a little longer, to which he replied that it was up to each individual how to proceed. The news that Kim made a fortune from investments started circulating around the office. Some were happy for him, some did not believe it, and some were even envious. Meanwhile, Sua and Chan decided to have coffee and discuss some matters. Approaching the table, Chan asked if everything was all right with the girl, to which he received an affirmative answer and sat down at the table. He asked Sua what she thought about the rumors circulating about Kim. The girl replied that she didn't believe a single word. Then, Chan asked directly if she really liked Kim, and her reaction, of course, confirmed his suspicions. She simply exploded with anger. He did not expect such a violent reaction. Of course, he reassured her, but warned her that such a reaction gave her away and that she shouldn't react so vehemently. Meanwhile, Kim was increasingly amazed at the number of people who thanked him. It turned out they had all invested money, and they all shared their plans for the money they had earned and were absolutely happy. And still people did not calm down and tried to find out the capital of their colleague, to which he evasively replied, but of course not the whole truth. And only he knew the truth about his account, 700 billion, that's the truth. However, one thought did not give him peace. He could not understand why such a rapid rise in price. His thoughts were interrupted by girls from the neighboring department who also decided to ask for investment advice, and he had no choice but to give them valuable advice. Khan was clearly dissatisfied with Kim's achievements. Everything about him infuriated her. She wondered why he had risen so high, for when they were married, he did nothing to get rich. Something had to be done about this. In the morning, Kim decided to check the company's group website, but even there, all the conversations were about investments. And then he received a message. Looking at it, he was shocked. His ex-wife was writing to him about what else she needed from him. He didn't even have time to finish reading when suddenly the phone rang. It was Sua. He thought something had happened, but it turned out the girl just wanted to chat. After chatting a bit, Sua suddenly asked what his plans were for the weekend. He had actually planned to go shopping on those days. He told the girl that when moving, he threw out all the old furniture and now wants to buy new ones. When the girl offered him her help with buying furniture, he gladly agreed. not even suspecting how happy she would be. Meanwhile, the girl was beside herself with joy at the prospect of spending some time with the person she cared about. She shared this news with Chong, who advised her to tell Kim about her feelings. The next day, Kim arrived at the appointed time, but Sua was not there yet, so he decided to stop by the cafe and wait for her there. But he didn't even notice that the girl had already been watching him from a distance. And there she is, thought Kim, looking at the approaching girl. She's on time, as always. Approaching, she asked how long he had been waiting for her, to which Kim replied that he had just arrived. Well, let's go shopping, and they went into the store. Sua first suggested just walking around and looking at something, and only then making her choice. When they walked side by side, she wondered if this could be a date. Although how could a date take place in a furniture store, and she laughed to herself. Kim moved towards one of the shelves. He saw something interesting. She had no choice but to follow him. Many purchases were made that day. As Kim walked through the store, he thought about how nice it was to go shopping when you had a lot of money and could afford anything you wanted. After finishing their shopping, they decided to go to a cafe, chat, and simply relax. Sua didn't muster up the courage to confess. Meanwhile, Khan was getting more and more upset. She didn't like that after the divorce. Not only did Kim get rich, but this girl was also chasing after him. Something unthinkable was happening at work. The entire company had started investing in cryptocurrency. What's happening to people? And Kim stood there thinking that the currency price had already risen dozens of times, not for nothing. All this talk of profit had already bored him, although he himself thought about the state of his assets. But hearing it at every turn was already unbearable. He thought that most likely the price would soon start to fall, and people would start suffering huge losses, and then hell would break loose. And then he remembered what his father had told him, that even when a person wins, it doesn't mean he has received the money, and that one should rejoice only when the winnings are in one's hands. And Kim decided that it was time to overcome his greed and sell everything so as not to lose it all. But his colleague, Ki Ram-hoon, did not think so. On the contrary, he thought that the price would only rise and did not listen to the advice of others. He thought that only he could be considered a real investor, and that only he knew how to act correctly. He thought that if the currency continued to rise, he would become richer than everyone, and that he would then laugh at everyone. What will buy itself a sports car cooler than Kim's, and will generally be the most famous person in the city? And he also dreamed of marrying Cho Sua, to whom he had long been attracted. Looking at the monitor screen, Ki Ram-hun wondered why Kim decided to sell all the assets. Had he gone mad? He thought that it made no sense to sell everything now, since the price was just starting to rise. How beautiful our office building looks at dawn, Kim thought as he approached work. The next day, Kim went to see the senior manager to discuss a very important matter, and Men-guk suggested they talk in a quiet place, and they decided to go up to the roof. The senior manager preferred more silence, and that no one could interfere with their conversation. To start with, he congratulated Kim on such a successful deal, and then decided to get down to business. Kim did not prolong the conversation and handed the sheet to the manager. This was a leave request, although Men-guk thought the guy was going to quit. He was a little shocked since Kim was now rich and he could, in principle, not work. He recalled a recent conversation about this with Sua. He told her that he wanted to go to America to visit a friend. The girl was a little upset, but didn't show it and simply wished him good luck. The senior manager approved Kim's vacation and said he would sign his application immediately. And then the guy decided to share his feelings with an older colleague, that he simply didn't know how to live on since he had nothing to strive for. He spoke about how everyone has their own dream, that people strive for something, but he has nothing but money. But An Men-guk reassured him, saying that everything would be fine, and he would definitely have a dream to strive for. And he told how in childhood he had a dream of playing golf. His parents supported him in everything, and he was happy. Kim asked him what happened next, why he gave up that occupation. The colleague replied that he had learned about the embezzlement of his family and that it was leading them to ruin. Then he realized that it was easier to go somewhere with his family and be happy than to ruin everything to the ground. And Men-guk asked how much money Kim had now, and he decided to share it with someone. To say that his colleague was shocked is an understatement. And leaving his friend in such a state, he decided it was time for him to leave, with a vacation ahead. And there he is, already at the airport. It's hard to believe that he can now afford this. On board, they greeted him like some kind of superstar, a celebrity. And he remembered how he flew economy class last time. It was awful, and now he would fly first class for the first time, and he liked it. As it turned out, he was not flying alone. Next to him sat a girl who was giving very loud orders over the phone. After finishing the conversation, she introduced herself, said that her name was Jin Yu-gen, and that she was the CEO of an automotive company. He also stated his name. But then they were served lunch, and the conversation had to be interrupted for a while. Kim was delighted with the taste of the dishes served to him. He had never eaten such delicacies before. That's what first class means. The drinks also seemed extraordinarily delicious to him, so much did he enjoy flying. After a hearty lunch, they continued their conversation, and the girl seemed interesting to him as an interlocutor. She told him about her company and what they do. In response, Kim told about himself. So he learned that the Jean Company manufactures high-quality cars to make them more attractive to the buyer. The girl decided to ask him what kind of cars he prefers, to which he replied that he has an Italian car. And at the same time, he let her know that he was not very attracted to Korean cars. It seems Jin was somewhat taken aback by such a response. She never expected anyone to speak negatively about their car. She didn't like it, but she decided not to dwell on it. Time flew by unnoticed during the conversations. After saying goodbye and wishing each other luck, they went their separate ways, each to their own business. When Kim came out of the airport building, he could not believe his eyes. Was he really in America? Someone called out to him. Turning around, he saw his friend Manhwa, who had been waiting for him for a long time. Kim looked at him in amazement. He had changed so much. Could this really be the same men? He had gained so much weight. The friend laughed, patted Kim on the shoulder, and suggested having a snack and drinking coffee. And only Khan was still dissatisfied. How could he leave? How dare he? Why did she find out last? Sitting at lunch, she looked unwell, which her colleagues also noticed, so she decided to drop the subject, but still remained absorbed in her thoughts. One of the girls understood what was troubling Han and told her everything, while the others sat silently, watching this altercation. Apparently, she didn't like being figured out, so she got up and ran away without explaining anything. She didn't expect that and was furious, but glancing at her phone, she grinned maliciously. There, on the screen, a tidy sum glowed, which had grown 100-fold after investing in crypto. Meanwhile, Kai Ram-hoon boasted that he was cooler than Kim, since he was in no hurry to sell his currency, that he would wait until the price went up even more. Colleagues, of course, began to ask him if it wasn't too risky, to which he merely shrugged his shoulders, thinking that he was smarter than everyone else. The manager, Ann, was worried because he had sold all his assets on Kim's advice, and thought about how he could have earned even more, envying those who were in no hurry to get their money. One of the colleagues said that he also sold all the assets like Kim and doesn't regret it, for he believed that Kim was doing the right thing and felt confident to do the same, so he followed his example. What friendly people here, Kim thought, looking at the girl who brought them their order. He noted that hamburgers are very tasty and incomparable to anything else. Here Mung noticed a couple approaching them. They were his American acquaintances. They also decided to stop for a snack, and what luck, they met their friend. The guys joined them, men introduced them to Kim, and so their lunch went on in a peaceful conversation. Chris said that he runs a company that develops autonomous driving systems for trucks, and Helen shared that she also has her own company that manufactures clothing and footwear from eco-friendly materials. The guys also shared that they really love to relax, go to ski resorts because it's so great to feel free. And Chris shared that Men is a very good friend and helps them with everything. Kim liked the new acquaintances, and he thought how great it was that he was able to fly here to his friend. It was fun to watch Chris laugh at Men for gaining weight and take his burger away. Those are real friends. After the cafe, Kim and Men went to Men's apartment. It was definitely worth resting after the flight. Kim, engrossed in his surroundings, almost missed the moment when a can of drink came flying at him. It turned out it was beer. "You need to relax," my friend commented. After drinking a few cans, Kim told his friend that he had divorced, and the friend appreciated this bold move, since Han Chaewon was indeed unbearable. Then he shared with his friend that he had earned a decent amount of money from cryptocurrency. I supported Kim, saying that many people in America also got rich from this. Kim, after a little hesitation, decided to ask his friend for help, for that was the very reason he had come here. And it was he who asked Men to help with the creation of his own company. But his friend thought it was just a joke, that Kim had too much to drink. But the guy assured that he was not drunk, and that this was a very serious and conscious decision, and he had already thought it through well. I tried to explain to Kim that this requires money, ideas, and the ability to manage all of this. And then he thought that having money is not everything. It's not enough for business. So Men suggested to Kim the idea that it would be better to invest this money in some company. But he had no such experience, and he turned to his friend for help again, to explain to him how to do it properly. The next day, they shared with Chris their plans to invest in his company. Kim told about this in more detail with the help of his friend, who advised him to do so. He explained this by the fact that Chris's company's technologies are valued highly enough to receive an investment offer from a major corporation from Korea. Chris said that they are already negotiating investments, but Kim said that the terms they are being offered are unacceptable, as they are trying to reduce the amount and asking for more shares. Of course, Chris understood this, but he didn't understand why Kim would invest $700,000 for just 10% of the shares. The guy replied that those were his terms and he wanted to become Aurora's partner. Chris carefully studied all the documents and decided to offer to buy the shares for a slightly higher amount. He told Men not to exaggerate and reminded him that his initial amount was smaller. And then he even proposed that he sell Kim 20% of the shares for $900,000. He told his friend that he knows about the situation of his company, that a lot of money is required, and that other companies simply wants to absorb them, and warned that Kim would certainly not do that, but would only wish for prosperity. Chris was confused and didn't know what to do. The offer was essentially not bad. I did not intend to retreat and looked closely at my friend. And so, after a brief deliberation, Chris and Kim finally shook hands to seal the deal. Chris went out onto the street, thanked his friend for the help, but he slapped himself on the forehead and laughed. And then Kim had a brilliant idea. He asked his friend to recommend him a few more companies to invest in. Meanwhile, at the office, Jin Yugen was informed that Aurora had rejected their investment proposal. It turned out that not only did this company refuse, but another one also preferred someone else as an investor, which was a blow for Jin's company. She was furious, that's an understatement, but who is this mysterious investor? However, in the company where Kim worked now, no one was in the mood for fun. The stock started to fall in price. Everyone who did not listen to Kim was outraged because they lost their money. Khan was also upset because her assets were halved. But how was that possible? That's not what she had dreamed of. One of Menguk's colleagues approached him and shouted that he was to blame for everything, to which he replied that they were all to blame themselves and he had not forced anyone to do anything. Everyone would like to punch him because it was he who said that Kim Shin was wrong and sold everything too early. And Kim had more serious problems. "We're retreating," he shouted to his friend. "They'll kill us." But his friend could no longer hear him. Not hearing a response, he turned around, but Men was already lying motionless on the ground. "Sorry," he whispered. But it was too late. The enemy fired and the bullet pierced Kim. They could no longer fix anything. And the one who shot straight in the back stood and smirked. He enjoyed watching the defeated enemy. "Kill us," Kim screamed. "Kill us already. Why are you prolonging our torment?" And then he said, "Man, maybe we should have a snack. Enough playing. We were killed again. It's time to admit defeat." His friend disagreed with him. They had to try again and win. Kim thought that his friend had helped him a lot with investments and wanted to thank him by giving him an apartment. But Men refused, since he had helped his friend selflessly. But seeing the apartment, I was shocked. It had everything a real man could only dream of. A powerful new model computer, various game consoles, everything sparkled and shone. It was not an apartment, but a dream. After what he had seen, Men of course agreed to accept this gift, but on one condition, that I would visit him more often. Later, I decided to share with a friend that I want to travel some more. The boss allowed me to extend my vacation. "Travel is good," Men said thoughtfully. Then I didn't even suspect what it would all lead to. Having thought for a bit, he asked me for a small favor, and I naturally agreed. How could I refuse a friend? My request will be quite unusual, and here I realized that there is a catch somewhere. But where exactly? And yet I trusted him so blindly for no reason. Our bus rushed off into the distance towards new adventures and new discoveries. And why ours? Because that was the request of my friend. The girl was sleeping peacefully on my shoulder, but who is this girl? I don't know anything about her. "Oh, Menu, why are you doing this to me?" A friend asked me to take his colleague's sister, Ellie, with me. Said she was already an adult and wouldn't cause me any trouble, but I didn't think she was exactly like that. He only told me how old she was, that she had just finished college, and asked me to take care of her. And that was all, in his opinion, that I needed to know. I naively thought she was just a girl with pigtails. But when she got on the bus and sat down next to me, things wouldn't be as simple as I had imagined. So lost in my thoughts, I didn't even notice that we had arrived. And apparently I had fallen asleep, as Ellie woke me up with her shout that we had arrived. This was Los Angeles. How beautiful it was. I never thought a city could be so beautiful. I didn't understand why people were looking at us that way until I turned to the girl. She, without embarrassment, showed her emotions and they were so pure. We were walking around the city and chatting. Ellie asked me about the places I had already been to and told me a little about herself. It turned out that we were both in this city for the first time, which made it even more interesting. She was so sweet, and despite her age, naive, and so delighted with everything new, I even envied her spontaneity. I was thinking about what I should ask Ellie. Maybe she wants to visit some specific place, maybe she had plans. I stopped and looked at her. She seemed to be dissatisfied with something. But being lost in my thoughts, I could not understand what she wanted from me. She started explaining something to me again, and I stood there looking at her with an idiotic expression on my face, and that's when it finally dawned on me what she was talking about. As it turned out, she was talking about having made her own travel plan and suggested following it. And I, of course, agreed, since I didn't know where to start myself. "We came," she announced, but I didn't even understand where we were. It was a huge building, outwardly resembling a palace. It was magnificent. And it took off. Thanks to Ellie, we visited a lot of interesting places. I didn't expect it to be so cool. We walked until evening, visited all the most beautiful places in the city. I have never seen such a beautiful sunset. Looking through the photos, I noticed that we look pretty good together, and she's a beauty. After such a walk, it wouldn't hurt to have a bite to eat. Ellie suggested dining at the restaurant on the ship's deck. Sitting at the table, we chatted merrily. She turned out to be a wonderful conversationalist. It was easy and peaceful with her. Ellie began to talk about her studies, how she tried hard in order to later find a decent job with equally decent pay. When she told me she found a job on Wall Street, I couldn't believe my ears. She was so lucky. And then I proposed to her to drink to our dreams and to them always coming true. After dinner, we went to the hotel. Of course, I wanted a decent place, but Ellie assured me that we would be fine in a hostel too and that expensive is not always good. She went into the room and sat on the bed. It looked so provocative, but she just laughed and said she couldn't help but tease me. When we had already lain down, she looked down at me and smiled, wishing me a good night. Lying in bed, I thought about what a joker Ellie was after all. How could she joke with such a serious look? And at that moment, the girl was already sweetly snoring and probably seeing wonderful dreams. The next day flew by quickly, and in the evening we decided to go to the pool. She had to persuade me for a long time. A sudden silence fell, and I couldn't understand what was going on until I heard someone calling me. I looked up and saw her, Ellie. She was beautiful. And without much thought, she dived into the water. And I didn't even understand what it was at all. Approaching the pool, I sat down on the edge and decided to sit there and watch the girl. She swam up and sat down next to me, asking why I didn't want to keep her company, and I reluctantly replied that I couldn't swim. But what she had in mind, I didn't have time to think about it, as I was already waist-deep in water. That quick girl? That's all I managed to think. I noticed a trio of guys standing by the edge of the pool and smirking. Then they offered to get acquainted with Ellie, to which she refused. They tried to approach her, but Kim blocked their way, which they certainly did not expect. Then the blonde guy tried to take Ellie's hand, but he didn't make it either. Kim intercepted his hand and told him to get lost. And just as I thought about distracting them so that Ellie could leave quietly, she pushed me aside and stepped forward herself. And she's a brave girl. She immediately ordered them to apologize and get lost, at which the guys laughed. And then a heavy hand fell on the shoulder of one of them. It was a guard. The guys had apparently been aggressive towards visitors more than once and had been reprimanded by security before. You could just see it on their faces. After that, it was definitely worth having a drink, and Ellie and I went to the bar, which was provided to us as compensation. When we were sitting chatting, the girl asked me to tell a little about myself, but what could I tell her? There was nothing special in my life. When Ellie found out about my ex-wife, she simply went berserk and couldn't understand how I could have put up with her for so long, though I didn't understand it either. Lying in bed, I kept thinking about the girl with whom I had spent several days side by side. This girl awakened some incomprehensible or long-forgotten feeling in me. She is so wonderful, but what is happening to me? And to distract myself, I decided to look at cryptocurrency prices. The price of many has already fallen by 80%. Wow. How much I would have lost if I hadn't sold everything back then. I heard a knock on the door, wondering who it could be, and of course, it turned out to be Ellie. When I opened, I was stunned by her appearance. She was standing in just a nightgown, right at my doorstep. I was even struck speechless by her appearance, but what is she doing here at this hour and looking like that? But she put her finger to my lips and told me to be quiet for a little while, she looked like a fairy tale princess, just as beautiful and unattainable, but at the same time simply such. But it turned out not as I had imagined. She was just bored and wanted to chat. I never imagined that you could just lie in the same bed with a girl and talk, just talk. He lay with his eyes closed and was saying something to her, while she admired him. Ellie probably, and even most likely, wanted something more, but he got ahead of her and said he wasn't ready for a new relationship. Then the girl suggested that they simply chat about nothing and everything. And while the girl was thinking about what else they could talk about, he simply fell asleep. Does that ever happen? Well, well, you said you were ready to talk all night long. She was certainly disappointed, but decided that it was enough for the first time, moved closer to him, put her hand on his chest, and also fell asleep. Time flew by very quickly, and the moment of farewell had come. Everyone was heading home. Ellie hugged Kim tightly and said she would miss him, and Kim promised to keep in touch with her in return. A long journey to America came to an end, and there Kim was already on board his plane, sitting in silence and recalling the day when he had just arrived in America. He thought about how he had met many interesting and good people, how he had become friends with them, and how wonderful it was that he had met a girl like Ellie. He looked out the window at the clouds passing by and felt a little sad about leaving this place. He thought about many other things, but most of all, his thoughts were occupied with work and what he would do when he arrived home. He was walking through the airport absorbed in his thoughts when someone called out to him. It turned out that his colleague and friend Chan Yep had already met him, and he was not the only one who had come to meet him. And it seems not only him, a little further away stood Sua. That was interesting. Did they come together, or how? Sue approached and asked how his vacation went, and in general how he was doing. She was interested in everything related to Kim. He replied that everything was fine and suggested to his friends that they have lunch somewhere. Of course they agreed, since it was already lunchtime. He invited them to visit a Japanese restaurant and said not to worry about money. After a hearty lunch, friends went to work, and Kim, having arrived home, could not believe that his vacation was over. He was glad to be home. He decided to check his phone, who was writing what, and was shocked by how many messages he had missed while he was with his colleagues. He received letters from men, asking him to visit more often and not forget his friend. Ellie also wrote that she had been to an interview and found a job, and asked when they would see each other again. And here, he definitely didn't expect this. He found a message from Khan. She asked about his vacation, how he spent it, then wrote that she was sad that he left without telling her anything. But her love confession caused a sensation. He could not believe his eyes. She wrote that she missed him and felt sorry that he had lost money on investments. Further, there was a message about why he doesn't reply to her, whether he has already forgotten her and found another one. And in the last one, she lost her temper and unleashed all her anger on him, which is in her spirit. Nothing changes. And without a moment's hesitation, Kim decided it was time to quit and blocked her. Looking at the night city, he thought how wonderful it was that he had divorced her after all. The next morning, Kim arrived at the office not empty-handed. It turned out he had brought gifts for all his friends. But his colleagues reacted strangely somehow. He didn't understand what was going on. He asked what happened. Everyone silently looked at him, and no one seemed to be going to explain. And then he realized that not everyone followed his advice to sell investments, and many lost huge sums. Someone called out to him, and he saw manager Eun Meng-guk and his deputy, So Jong-ki. They approached Kim, and Meng-guk asked if there was a gift for them too, and then laughed. Kim handed them the packages, and when they opened them, they were shocked by such expensive gifts. The manager asked if he had spent too much on such gifts, to which the guy replied that everything was fine, and he didn't mind spending anything for his friends. And he also reminded that when he first came to work at the company, it was in Meng-guk who helped and supported him. But colleagues started talking over each other that these were too expensive gifts, and they couldn't accept them. Kim couldn't understand what the problem was. He tried to calm them down and said that he did not regret the money spent, and that it did not play any role for him. And then one of his friends blurted out that there were rumors that Kim had lost a lot of money. What? Who is spreading these rumors? I'm hearing about this for the first time. And why would anyone do that? Friends exchanged glances and began to recall from whom they first heard such a thing. But it seems Kim had already guessed himself. I decided to climb onto the roof, as I really missed the beautiful view of my city. He approached the railing, looked down from above. It was beautiful, and he had only taken a sip of coffee when he felt a piercing gaze upon him. I knew that Na Sang-guk would follow me, because I was 100% sure that he was the one spreading those rumors about me. And then he spoke, asking how I had been to America, if everything was fine with me, and with these questions he confirmed my guess. I certainly didn't let on that I knew everything, greeted him and thought about how to draw him out, but he kept pestering, circling around, trying to extract information from me. But this man was not so simple. He always looked down on others, was ready to trample, and over the years in the company he caused me a lot of problems. I knew he would be beside himself when he found out I had become rich, but I don't know how far he might go. He was so excited he couldn't wait to learn all the details of my life. Well, he'll get them. He said that I could trust him, and that he wouldn't tell anyone anything. Of course, we know such people. And I told him that in fact my affairs are not going well now, and that everything is so bad. Let's see how he will present the news this time. I turned out to be right. It didn't take even 5 minutes after we parted ways before he started loudly proclaiming that I'm almost bankrupt, even pulling numbers out of thin air. My colleagues got worried. They were unaware of my plan. Well, we'll see who is capable of what. When he was left alone, he was already celebrating victory, but he didn't think it would all go unpunished. He thought he would always be on top. I'm like a nasty caterpillar to him. Well, enjoy it while you can, Sanguk. The last move will be mine. And then the boss came in. He informed his colleagues that there would be a dinner at the best restaurant in the city that evening. Sanguk refused to go. But as soon as the boss said that the most exquisite beef dishes would be served, he was almost the first to get ready to run. That same evening, the colleagues came to the restaurant in full force, and when they saw the lavish table, they could not believe their eyes. Everything was simply superb. The dishes, the tableware, the table setting, and just the atmosphere itself. When they took me in their hands, they were simply horrified. They had never seen such prices before. Kim came last. Everyone greeted him and was very happy to see him. He looked amazing. Kim took the microphone in his hands and decided to immediately thank everyone for responding to his invitation. Everyone was puzzled as to how this could be, since they had only heard today that he had gone bankrupt. But Kim continued to say that he had missed everyone very much, which is why he decided to spend time together with them, his friends. My colleagues sat with their mouths open, unable to understand what was happening. It can't be. Kim ordered all this. Sanguk didn't understand why he then told him that he went bankrupt. The most important thing is that he told everyone that Kim Shin is ruined, and everyone believed him. But now colleagues are whispering that he lied. And then Na Sanguk jumped up and loudly said that Kim himself had told him about this. But his colleagues were no longer listening to him. They were discussing Kim Shin's foresight and how they should have listened to him. Kim did not publicly say that it was Sanguk who was spreading rumors, but everyone understood that anyway. The truth did not refuse the barb directed at him. One needs to know the enemy face to face. Colleagues supported Kim, and he was glad to have such friends. And just as Kim was about to sit down, he saw the CEO. Most rose from their seats to greet him, but he gestured that it was not necessary. Then he turned to Kim and said he wanted to talk to him privately. The guy offered the CEO to sit down at the table and discuss everything over dinner. Director Joe started talking about investments, about Kim's success. But so far he had not stated the purpose of his visit, and this was alarming. Kim tried to look as casual as possible so as not to give himself away. And then he started talking about Kim's ex-wife, but what did she have to do with it? The director said that Kim was wrong to divorce Han, that she was a beautiful woman, and a lot more. But the guy just couldn't figure out what he was getting at. And the director continued. He thanked Kim for everything he had done, and said that thanks to him he was now happy. Here's what was revealed. Director Joe and Han are now together. Kim was, of course, in shock, but then he thought that it was even for the better and decided to congratulate the boss. Kim was walking down the street and memories engulfed him, memories of the past. He was thinking about what love really is since he once thought he loved. He was happy with Han, first flirting, then dating and vacationing together, then marriage. But in reality, everything turned out not as rosy as he had imagined. And only after the wedding did he realize that they were completely different. She constantly humiliated him, neglected him, and life with her seemed like hell to him. And yet he did not ask for much. He only wanted a close-knit and strong family. And so he walked in his thoughts, paying no attention to anyone, only occasionally glancing at the happy people hurrying home. For he really didn't want much. But why did fate treat him so cruelly? He was simply wandering the streets, not even understanding where he was going. He wanted to be alone. Meanwhile, Suwa was hurrying to dinner. She was finishing up her business and was running late. She looked at her watch and hoped she could still make it. Perhaps not all was lost yet. And Kim was already approaching his house. He was already frozen and decided that it was not worth walking anymore. It was time to go home. He was approaching the house while Suwa was running towards the restaurant. And what did they see there? Suwa saw that dinner was already over and everyone had left. And she was of course upset. And there Kim saw Ellie, who was waiting for him at the entrance, which surprised him very much. Ellie, what is she doing here? Or rather, how did she even get here? She greeted and smiled sweetly, and she was so charming. Poor Ellie. She must have frozen. How did I not notice that winter here is colder than in America? Kim asked what had brought her to Korea, to which she replied that she had missed him and wanted to see him. She also said that she had a few days off before going back to work, and that's why she decided to spend them with him. Ellie said that she would stay with him, but since he has only one bed, but they have already slept in one bed, haven't they? Meanwhile, he went to the kitchen. After the shower, he would need to feed the guest. He hadn't cooked for anyone in a long time and decided to make his favorite dishes, the ones he was best at. Memories flooded back of how he once wanted to please his wife, but she was dissatisfied as always. He tried to prove to her that what he had cooked was very tasty, but he failed to convince her. With a pounding heart, he set the table, while the memories kept haunting him. When the girl came out of the shower, he had everything ready, and she, without even suspecting what was going on in his soul, announced that she was very hungry and the smell was simply mind-blowing. Kim certainly warned her that he had set the table in a hurry, but she was no longer listening to him. He expected anything, but Ellie, squinting with pleasure, said that it was very tasty. She said that it was much tastier than what they cook in Korean restaurants. And so the dinner went on, he was silent, she ate and praised his food. It was time to go to bed. Kim was certainly not very comfortable, but there was nothing to be done about it. Ellie had just lain down and immediately started snoring, while Kim lay there, looking at her and wondering if she felt anything for him. But he wasn't thinking about a new relationship yet. He touched her cheek. She stirred, probably dreaming something good now. He was just lying there looking at her. Could it be that she wasn't indifferent to him? Is that even possible? His thoughts were interrupted by Ellie. She moved closer to him and hugged him. He froze, unable to move. "Ellie," he whispered, but the girl seemed to be asleep. She was either dreaming or pretending. He moved even closer and leaned in, couldn't resist, and then she opened her eyes and kissed him herself. He looked at her and did not understand absolutely anything of what had just happened. And so they looked at each other and then simply vanished, dissolving into kisses and wild passion. And the night went its course. And it was beautiful. Perhaps not only for these two. The morning was not beautiful for everyone. One of the pharmaceutical companies failed. The director was shouting into the phone to someone that this could not be happening. Another supply refusal, but why? The deputy tried to find out what happened. Yusok Tai told him that they had another failure, the fifth that month. Here the phone rang again. They exchanged glances and the director picked up the receiver, wondering who it could be. He quickly greeted his interlocutor and began to talk about how to place an order, but then abruptly stopped. "Kim, is that you?" Kim and Ellie arrived at his office at the appointed time. They had something to discuss. The director tried to apologize for receiving them at his workplace, but Kim seemed little concerned about this fact. First of all, he introduced Ellie and said that she was helping him deal with business matters. A foreigner. The interlocutors exchanged glances. They were surprised, and it seemed they did not hide it. Kim asked about the company's difficulties, to which Yusok Tae said that they were holding up well and assured him that they had enough orders. "They say that some company is putting pressure on you so that your partners terminate their contracts with you," Kim said. Then he continued. He said that he was here on his own initiative, not as an employee, and added that he would like to invest his own funds in the company. But the director decided to refuse. As he admitted, they would not be able to last even a couple of months. "I don't know how long it will take us to get out," Yusok-ta continued, "but it's better to invest that kind of money in something more promising." Both sides fell silent here, each thinking their own thoughts, and each wanting the best way out of the given situation. Kim was the first to speak. He posed the question differently. How much money is needed for the company? "Thousands. Maybe millions, maybe even billions," said the director. Kim continued. He said that the company is wonderful and produces very high-quality medicines, and he is ready to invest any amount and showed them the amount on the screen. "We are ready to invest any required amount," he said. Ellie checked all the documents and nodded in agreement. There were, of course, some minor issues, but they were not so critical. The situation is certainly difficult due to debts, but productivity is high, and there are many clients with long-term contracts. If the work is set up and a new plant is launched, the company's income and its value will increase. Here the director came to his senses and asked who Ellie was, as she was well-versed in such matters. Kim proudly said that she works as a financial expert in one of the largest American companies. When all the formalities were settled, it was time for everyone to return to their own affairs. Kim and Ellie rushed along the road, and the girl thought it was a useful experience for her, and that even in the largest companies, such work is not given to a beginner. "By the way, what about payment? Every job should be paid for." Kim laughed and asked how much she valued her work. She brought him to a place he didn't expect. It looked rather creepy, of course. Ellie strapped him to the chair and laughed at his pitiful attempts to free himself. "Alas, it's too late to refuse. Maybe we'll enjoy this game together," she roared with laughter. After they left, Ellie looked into her notes. It seemed she had a whole list there of what she wanted to do. "Kim," she asked, "didn't you like the prison break game? It was cool, wasn't it?" "It was fun," he responded, "especially when I was in handcuffs." "Yes," Ellie said. "How I wish the company I'll be working for was located in your city. We'd spend more time together." Kim wondered if he should buy this company. Well, I can, although it will be difficult, for now I don't have enough money for that. Nevertheless, he thought, something could be organized in the commercial district. His thoughts were interrupted by Ellie's voice, asking what that was, pointing somewhere to the side. It's a place where you can watch movies, Kim replied, and the girl pulled him there. When the worker saw Ellie, the whole world ceased to exist for him. She was the goddess of his dreams. But then he noticed that she was not alone, and he was pierced with anger, wondering why she was with him and what made him better than himself. He could not understand. He looked at the couple and thought that he could have been in Kim's place. His thoughts were interrupted by Kim's voice. He asked which hall they could go to watch the Chosen movie. After he told them the hall number, he began to curse himself for his indecisiveness and politeness. They went to the room, discussing something sweetly, and he watched them go, unable to understand what girls liked about guys like Kim, and not guys like him. And then he decided to pretend to clean up in order to eavesdrop on what they were doing there. But they were indeed simply watching a movie, huddled together, simply sitting side by side. And so they felt good together, just sitting embraced, doing nothing. And then Ellie asked what if the events from the movie they were watching happened in real life. Kim replied that it was unlikely to be like in the movies, that it would be completely different. Morning, he heard Ellie coughing. What's wrong with her? Maybe she caught a cold. He touched her shoulder, tried to wake her up, but she didn't react. What was it? Then he turned her face towards him. She coughed up blood from her mouth. It can't be, really. He quickly jumped out of bed, scooped up Ellie in his arms, rushed out the door and ran down the corridor without looking where he was going. Running out into the street, he could not understand what was happening. The streets were empty, cars on fire, like in that horror movie. Dead people lay scattered everywhere on the ground. It was a kind of hell. Ellie rested her head on his shoulder and barely breathed. He had to do something. He tried to look around, but whichever way he looked, the scene was the same. Dead people and fire all around. He had to save her at all costs, and then she wheezed in a voice not her own, corpses everywhere. He tried to look at her, but there was no longer his Ellie. It was a terrifying skull that screamed that it was all his fault. He opened his eyes and lay motionless, trying to make sense of what it was. He got up and looked at Ellie. She was snoring softly. Finally, Kim realized that it was just a dream. A terrible dream. He jumped up, opened the desk drawer and began searching for something in it. Found it. It was a business card. He remembered how Yu Sok-tae gave him this business card and said that he had once invested in this company. And he said that they are conducting analyses to study new strains of influenza and create vaccines. Kim immediately began dialing the number, already thinking that this would be a real breakthrough in medicine. The time spent with Ellie flew by unnoticed. It was time to say goodbye. They hugged tightly, and Kim promised that they would see each other soon and that he would miss her very much. And before he could see Ellie off, his phone rang. He answered the call. It was Manhwa. He roared with laughter after hearing Kim's story about the dream he had. He also said that he had already arranged a meeting with someone who is working on developing a vaccine using artificial intelligence. Kim told his friend that it would certainly not be easy to do all this, but it was worth trying. He talked with his friend on this topic for a long time, even managed to get home, and still decided to take the risk. Coming home, he dialed the number Ming had given him. It was Paul Lesser, a professor of infectious diseases who worked at the university. Paul said that men had warned him about the call and asked what specifically he was interested in. And Kim immediately explained the essence of the problem to him and tried to explain everything in detail. Paul understood and said that artificial intelligence is already being used in medicine, but very little, and said that it is a rather interesting idea. Kim and Paul simultaneously remembered Lee Hohen. He was a famous scientist, but why did he abandon his work in America? And Paul said that once a professor told him that his research was meaningless and would not be profitable. For this, Lee Hohen hit him hard, after which he left, deciding that he would work alone. Paul asked when Kim was meeting with Hohen. He wanted to go with him to support him. After some time, they were already standing at the threshold of the biotech company where Lee Hyoyeon was the CEO. He introduced himself, and Kim looked and could not believe that this was the most famous explorer. Paul and Lee shook hands and exchanged greetings, as in the past. And then I noticed that Lee Hohen was somehow not well. He coughed heavily and started bleeding. Paul also looked at his friend in a strange way. Apparently, he had seen this before. My guesses turned out to be correct. Paul patted his friend on the back, and Lee hurriedly began to apologize. When we were already sitting at the work desk, he apologized for his rudeness at the first meeting and asked what had brought us to him. The floor was already occupied with his business. Interesting if he ever releases the dumbbells from his hands at all. I decided not to dwell on this and inquired about Dr. Hohen's health? He replied that everything was fine, but the reason was that he had not slept for several days, so I suggested postponing the meeting until next time. And then it was as if a monster had possessed him. He shouted that there could be no next times. That time was passing too quickly as it was. He was screaming so loudly that drops of blood were coming out of his mouth, and it really looked very creepy. Paul and I sat in silence, mesmerized, watching him, waiting for him to finish his angry tirade. He calmed down and spoke. So you want to know why artificial intelligence is now being used to create a vaccine? Let me explain to you. He turned on the projector and turning to me asked what I knew about the flu. I gave some incoherent answer and almost hit the mark. But he began to explain to us about viruses, where they come from, and how they progress in different groups of people. He talked about all this for a long time, and I concluded that the existing vaccines are not entirely effective, and he wants to create something new. Then he took out all the documents for this project and began showing me what they had already achieved. Paul carefully read all of Lee's notes and asked questions during the process. And from this, I understood that he had done this at his previous job as well. "And how is your support in Korea?" Paul asked, to which Lee replied that it was not very good and there was not enough money for further research. Lesser hugged Hohen tightly and told him that he was in awe of his perseverance, that he had come so far despite the lack of resources and support. I decided to clarify with Paul whether he really thinks this study will be successful, and he answered me honestly that the research itself was interesting to him, but when it came to investors, it was much more complicated. I sat and thought about what to do. Of course, in the future it could bring a lot of money, but now a lot needs to be invested for this. And then Lee interrupted me. He offered me a deal, quite tempting. If within 5 years he does not achieve success, then he will transfer all his developments to me and retire. I couldn't believe my ears, and Paul also seemed to be shocked by such a decision. Then I decided to clarify how much he currently needs to continue the research. He replied that about $3 billion a year. When I named the amount I was willing to invest, both scientists opened their mouths in amazement. Yes, the sum of $60 billion is enormous. We said goodbye. I said I would wait for the results, and Lee promised on his part that he would do everything possible. He was saying something else, but I didn't hear him anymore. And I was thinking about what would happen during these long 5 years. Sue came to work in a good mood as usual and immediately decided to find out if Kim was there. She asked about this from one of her colleagues, to which he replied that he had seen him a couple of minutes ago. She decided that Kim, as usual, went to drink coffee at his favorite place and followed him. When she had already climbed onto the roof, she saw that he was talking to manager An Menguk and decided not to disturb them. The girl noticed that Kim passed some note to the manager, wondering what was in it. And then Sua heard Kim say that it was a resignation statement. But how could that be? She could not even think that such a thing could happen. And he was already thinking about how rich he was, that now he could not work but live at his pleasure. Now he will be able to be free and fulfill his cherished dreams. I thought about not having to take the subway to work every day and sit there overtime, not having to fulfill all the whims of my boss. For him, it was complete economic freedom and independence, his money working for itself. Now Kim Shin is an unemployed person with a huge amount of money. Isn't that wonderful? The whole office came to say goodbye to him. They were sorry to part with their loyal friend and colleague. Kim said that he was grateful to everyone for always supporting him and helping him in everything, and that he was pleased to work in such a close-knit team. Someone asked what he now thinks to do, what he will do next, to which Kim replied that he wants to invest and live a carefree life. The manager, Anne, approached and said that it was a pleasure to work with him and congratulated him on such a decision. One of the colleagues pretended to cry, but Kim quickly saw through him. The guy overacted. Then Chan laughed, came up and hugged him tightly, whispering for him to let him know where he would invest. He wanted to follow in Kim's footsteps, wanted to earn from investments, quit and live without working. But turning around, he saw manager Anna, who had clearly heard everything and was now standing and waiting for an explanation. Although, the manager thought, but said aloud that he could resign immediately, a smile did not leave his face. Then he turned to Kim and asked if he was going to say goodbye to the other departments. There was someone he simply dreamed of saying goodbye to, simply burned with desire. When he entered Khan's office, she immediately asked him if it was true that he was resigning. She didn't even listen to him and started talking about a modest life and something else. But he couldn't say a word. He didn't understand what she was talking about. Kim looked at Khan with even greater surprise and began to speak, but it seemed she had difficulty understanding his words. But he voiced to her what she definitely did not expect to hear. Kim said that he was rich and bought himself everything one could only dream of. He said he put all her numbers in spam and she would no longer be able to disturb his happy life. And then he thought about Sua. For some reason, she was not in her usual place, and yet it was her he wanted to see most of all. He had already guessed that she was not indifferent to him, so he wanted to say goodbye to her as painlessly as possible for her. Kim stood waiting for the elevator and thought that perhaps it was for the better that he and Sua didn't meet, as he was afraid of offending her. Meanwhile, the girl was standing around the corner and didn't know how to act properly. Chan approached her. He understood Sua's state at that moment, but did not understand why she did not want to take the first step towards her own happiness. He shook his head and said that with her indecisiveness, she was ruining her happiness. And Kim, descending in the elevator, thought about the recent events that had occurred, about how much had happened. Despite the fact that his father was a drunkard and a gambler, he helped him get rich, thereby securing a prosperous future. Then a meeting with Ellie. He thought that after the divorce he would be disappointed in people, but she was able to touch his heart. He left the company onto the street and breathed in the air of freedom. People were hurrying somewhere, some to work, some from work, and only he had nowhere to hurry to, and he was glad about that. Meanwhile, strange things began happening in Dr. Lee Hohn's laboratory. Something went wrong. The test subjects started feeling worse. Did everything really get out of control? Kim now had an expensive car, an apartment, a lot of money, and everything one could dream of. He had become a completely different person. And Ki Ram Hoon could not calm down. He kept dreaming of learning Kim's secret of success. But how could he ask him if he had always hated him and trampled him in the mud? He's probably far away by now and living without any troubles, he thought. And most likely his life is like paradise. Meanwhile, Kim had already become known as the richest person in Korea. Interviews had become an integral part of his life. And now, he was once again conversing with reporters. He was thinking about something of his own. While the female journalist had already introduced him to the viewers and started asking questions, and he was answering them automatically. He was already on the covers of all the local magazines and even made it into the top 10. Kim wrote to Ellie that he would soon return to the States and they would soon be able to see each other. His assistant and bodyguard May noticed that something was wrong, which she immediately asked about. But Kim reassured her and said that he was just distracted. Then the girl continued her report on how their affairs were going. It turned out that everything was going very well, even better than he had expected, and profits were growing. But he thought that something was missing. Could it be that he was already bored with such a life? May continued, saying that a message had come from Dr. Lee Hoyen. Kim listened carefully to every word the girl said and was shocked by the news. May continued, Dr. Lee wrote that a dangerous infection had begun to spread and had already been detected in several countries, and there was no cure yet. The car stopped, and the girl finished saying that the doctor was asking to provide additional housing for the staff. Kim thought it over and decided to build housing for these people, which he voiced to May. The construction was a done deal, as were other matters, and Kim decided to take a little break and relax. He entered the bar. The security let him in without any problems, although they didn't have to do that, but it was safer that way. The girl Kim was dating was sitting at the bar counter, and when he approached, she asked what help he needed. Kim smiled and said that he was sure Jin Yu-gen would not refuse his small request. Jin admitted that she had thought about dating, and didn't understand where this person had disappeared for 2 years. Here she noticed the security guard standing behind Kim and raised her eyebrow in confusion. Kim decided to skip over that moment and outlined the essence of the problem, and Jean agreed to help him. Kim took a sip of the refreshing drink and continued listening to the girl. But she seemed in no hurry to announce the terms on which she agreed to cooperate, and finally, after the glasses were filled, she spoke. The first condition was the shares of Aurora Company, which Kim bought, and the second was simply an offer to have a drink. Kim looked at her, not understanding whether she was serious or joking. It didn't seem like a joke, he thought, looking at the smiling girl. And Jean's father had already been informed of his daughter's prank, and it seems he was quite displeased. And the worker told what, where, and how it happened, and in what condition his daughter is now. Dad flew into a rage when he found out that his daughter got drunk, and with a guy too. Kim no longer knew how to drag Jin out of this place. It seemed she had too much to drink, but she didn't think so. She didn't want to leave and demanded to continue the party, asked for more drinks, and didn't want to leave. And Kim, looking at her, thought that she was cheerful anyway, but he didn't think that she could get so drunk and behave indecently. On leaving the bar, security picked up Jin and told Kim that they would take her home themselves, which he was very pleased about. Jin reluctantly followed into the car, thinking that her plan had gone a little differently than she had wanted, as she had expected a completely different outcome. Having arrived home, She was beside herself with anger that her plan had not worked out. This could not be happening. She was furiously angry. No joke. She expected something different from Kim. And the fact that her plan didn't work drove her into a rage. She needed him to achieve her goal, but what was her goal?